In Texas, several young women have vanished without trace, only to later be found murdered in chillingly disturbing ways.
We're not talking about someone walking, in the dark, after hours. We're talking about the middle of the day.
The method of their murder suggests a psychopath is on the loose.
He seemed to take pride, a sick kind of pride in his killing and in his technique with the tourniquet.
As the tourniquet killer grips the headlines, detectives race against time to unmask the predator haunting the community. Every lead slips through their fingers.
The master of lying and secrets and disguises.
When an unassuming telephone repairman is brought in for questioning about an unrelated crime, will a chilling discovery turn the investigation on its head?
He had to submit DNA as a result of now being a convicted sex offender.
Science like DNA has revolutionized criminal justice in my lifetime.
I didn't set out to kill her. That was not my intent.
Detectives piece together the evidence, slowly uncovering the face of a suspect. Which clue will expose the truth? What will be a killer's mistake? Police in Houston, Texas receive a report that 9-year-old Diana Rabola is missing. She's last seen at a grocery store just a few blocks from her home in Houston Heights. Andy Kahn, collaborating with the Houston Police Department, is urgently brought in to serve as the critical link between law enforcement and a deeply concerned family.
I was involved almost immediately with the Diana Rabola case. And here's somebody that's just walking down the street, buying a few items to take home for a family dinner. And boom.
2 days later, Diana's body is discovered on the loading dock of an abandoned building.
She was sexually assaulted, beaten, and then strangled.
She is found laying face up, a tourniquet wrapped tightly around her neck.
It's just unconscionable that someone can do this to a 9-year-old in the middle of the day. We're not talking about some isolated area. This is a populated part of the town. That's pretty brazen.
Detectives have encountered this chilling method of killing before. Diana's brutal murder bears an unsettling resemblance to another recent homicide. 2 years earlier, police discovered the body of 21-year-old Maria del Carmen Estrada in a parking lot behind a Dairy Queen in the Spring Branch neighborhood of Houston.
Maria was, a hard worker, trying to help her family, just taking public transportation to and from her work and just helping her family just go about life. And here she was again, vulnerable, by herself, no one else around. Seizing that opportunity, the killer abducts her, rapes her, kills her in excruciating slow fashion, and then dumps her.
Like Diana, Maria is found with a handmade tourniquet wrapped around her neck. District Attorney Kim Ogg is an assistant prosecutor in Harris County at the time. She's tasked with analyzing critical crime scene evidence.
When I'd worked in the Special Crimes Division of the Harris County District Attorney's Office, there were a series of crimes involving a signature mark, a tourniquet left on the bodies, which came across my desk. They were brought by homicide investigators who were working the cases, trying to figure out the whodunit.
The similarities between Diana and Maria, the time between deaths, and the method of murder lead investigators to fear they may be dealing with a serial killer.
The tourniquet takes your fingers off the pulse, literally, but it gave the killer the ability to turn life on and off.
He had a profile, we see, that he's attacking younger Hispanic women, young girls.
This is so methodically calculated as to how he picked his victims. These were young girls from the ages of 9 to 21, not doing anything wrong.
Who is responsible? Police need to build a profile of the killer. They focus on the locations of his attacks, centered in those Houston neighborhoods increasingly home to Latin American immigrants.
The neighborhoods in Houston were changing in the late 80s and 90s. They were going dramatically downhill in certain areas. Part of it was we had an immigrant population, very low on the socioeconomic scale, many times, many of them not citizens of the country. And so that created an opportunity for a serial killer who was looking for people who he could grab, rape, kill, and who might not be missed.
The one common denominator his victims had, besides being young, were they were by themselves. And little did they know that how vulnerable that made them to a sadistic predator.
I felt like it was only a matter of time before the next body would show up. That gumshoe detective work was applied.
They were able to extract DNA from Maria Estrada's fingernails.
Could DNA found under Maria's fingertips be a killer's mistake? In 1992, CODIS, a combined DNA index system that links profiles across jurisdictions in different parts of the United States, is still in its infancy. No connections are found.
There was no general testing of DNA.
You had problems in crime labs, and all sorts of Murphy's Law was going on with so many different entities as far as getting a match.
Investigators carefully preserve the DNA found under Maria's fingernails, knowing forensic science and databases are advancing rapidly. They hold on to the evidence, hoping for the day that her killer slips up and reveals his identity.
Looking for a serial murder was like looking for a needle in a haystack. And so the DNA evidence was collected.
Detectives believe the killer has a clear profile for his victims. Now they're building one for him, knowing that to catch him, they must first understand him.
The way he would kill his victims shows you his true colors and his insatiable need to seek attention.
I think a master of lying and secrets and disguises and things that covered his trail.
Dr. Judy Ho, a renowned forensic neuropsychologist, highlights the critical importance of building a psychological profile to unmask the killer.
I think that there was a couple of components to this. One is very poor impulse control, so he just did whatever he felt like. But the other piece of it is that he probably derived some kind of sick joy from dominating people who were vulnerable. Notice that he doesn't necessarily dominate people who were his size. He's not picking on people who were his own size. And so he's looking for victims that he would clearly be declared the winner. It was rigged from the start.
Without any other objective evidence, police might never have been able to find the correct killer.
Investigators need forensic evidence, but the science and database technology isn't advanced enough to deliver results. Police receive a call about a missing teenager, Dana Sanchez. She is last seen leaving her home, only to vanish without trace.
Again, 16-year-old teenager. Middle of the day, minding her own business, not doing anything wrong, not doing anything illegal, just doing what teenage girls do, you know?
A week goes by with no leads in Dana's disappearance until a local news station receives an anonymous call from someone claiming to be her killer.
He has the audacity to contact a local news station and tip them off as to where the body could be found, just so he can make sure that he got credit for the latest murder in his own mind. That's mine.
The caller claims to be Dana Sanchez's killer.
He basically was telling the media that, yeah, there's a serial killer roaming loose out there, killing young girls, and you need to be aware of that.
When a local news station in Houston receives an anonymous call from a person who claims that he's a serial killer, police have to take it seriously.
To contact a local news station and tip them off as to where the body could be found. You can actually visualize him at home in front of the television waiting for the local news to capture the story of what he did, and him just salivating.
Looking for any clue in their search for 16-year-old Dana Sanchez, police arrive at a barren field on the outskirts of the city, and Dana's lifeless body lies sprawled, decomposing in the dirt.
She was tortured and just dumped like the rest of them. Someone that can do that without any care in the world and just leave her out there just to rot. It's about the lowest of the low you could possibly imagine of a life form in this universe.
Still wrapped around Dana Sanchez's neck is the murder weapon, a tourniquet.
Dana Sanchez was a bit older, 16 years old. The MO is the same, he strangled her. We don't know much more else. We can assume she was probably sexually assaulted. What we do know is that a victim profile for sure has emerged.
The third young Hispanic woman strangled with a tourniquet in 3 years confirms investigators' fears. The suspected killer's call to a local news station leaves detectives fearing they're being lured into a dangerous game of cat and mouse.
He seemed to take pride, a sick kind of pride in his killing and in his technique with the tourniquet. It worked for him. It was his signature. And it distinguished him from other individuals who kill people with their bare hands.
Investigators have 3 victims, each with the murder weapon left at the scene. With no other clues to identify the killer, the case captures national attention. The media dubs the unknown predator the tourniquet killer, thrusting him into the spotlight.
Notoriety and fame that serial killers want and then ultimately achieve, and then all of a sudden you're a household name, your name's in the paper, your name's on the news. He so desperately wanted that.
The ensuing media frenzy may have been just what he wanted, but the pressure is on police to catch the killer.
Nobody could find anything.
For 3 years, police strive to make gains in identifying the tourniquet killer. They analyze the anonymous call made to the local news station. They look for further links between cases and meticulously gather forensic evidence. When a local telephone repairman is questioned by police for an unrelated crime, detectives see no reason to suspect a link to the elusive tourniquet killer.
Here's a guy that worked for the phone company, telephone company, Southwestern Bell, as a repairman.
Maybe you wouldn't suspect a family man that seemed happy in his marriage and in his family life.
His name is Anthony Shaw, and he is suspected of committing an horrific crime.
All of a sudden, Anthony Shaw does a despicable act when he sexually abuses and assaults his 2 young daughters. They make an outcry. He's arrested.
He raped his daughters, and his daughter's outcry spurred his arrest.
The repairman accused of sexually abusing his own children is 36-year-old Anthony Shaw. Investigators who are hopeful of convicting him for crimes against his own children search for any evidence from his past. What had made him such a monster?
A few things stand out for me about Shaw's early life, right? He was very precocious. He's already sort of making, 4 or 5-year-old, what could be construed as sexual advances towards these little girls.
One of the biggest red flags was that he would actually torture animals at a young age. It shows a level of lack of empathy, lack of emotionality.
There was something going on with his sister as well, okay? Apparently he had stabbed her in the head with a screwdriver. And we know again also from later reports that she didn't seem to be very empathetic towards him as well. Shaw used his sister to lure girls in the neighborhood back to, his house, or to grope them, to kiss them.
I think he instilled fear in his own sisters. And I think there was a part of his sisters that probably feared for themselves. They didn't do what he asked. And even though they knew that this couldn't lead to anything good, they were manipulated by him. And they were doing so possibly out of their own self-protection.
While investigating Shaw for sexual abuse of his own children, detectives hear from friends and neighbors that he appeared ordinary.
For a while, Shaw had a normal life. In addition to working at a regular job during the day, in the evening he performed the piano. So he was known amongst people who went and attended live music functions as well. There's some people that worked for the phone company astonished, and they were dumbfounded. They said, I worked with him. I know him. I went to lunch with Anthony. Sure. I can't believe that's him. He was so nice, such a normal guy.
Anthony Shaw seemed like a happily married man.
I do have to wonder about the true nature of that relationship. Did he really get married because he had genuine affection for this person, or was she basically used as a pawn in his game?
That's part of the facade that they try to maintain. That's kind of like their Jekyll and Hyde ego that they like to have. Is there some sort of normalcy where no one suspects anything?
We could see that from when Anthony was a child, from the torturing and killing of innocent animals to putting a screwdriver through his sister's head. So sadly, it's no surprise that he would definitely abuse his own family members as well.
It takes investigators 1 year to build a case against Shaw for the abuse of his own daughters.
So Anthony Shaw is convicted in 1998 of molesting his 2 daughters.
He's put on probation like many sex offenders are, particularly on your first offense, so that's not a surprise. He was put on probation. But the catch was he had to submit DNA as a result of now being a convicted sex offender.
When detectives confirm a match, they are stunned to discover that the assault on his family was just one piece of Shaw's larger web of horrific crimes.
And this is the turning point in the case.
Five years after his conviction for the abuse of his own daughters, the combined DNA index system, CODIS, established by the FBI, allows law enforcement agencies to share and compare DNA profiles across jurisdictions.
Because the laws had changed and DNA samples could and were taken from individuals charged with certain crimes, his sample was entered into CODIS, the national system for matching DNA to known individuals or unknown individuals.
When detectives check Anthony Shaw's DNA against unsolved crimes on the CODIS network, it reveals a match they'd been looking for 8 years.
The DNA was then ultimately matched from Estrada's fingernails.
6 years into an 8-year sentence of probation for indecency with a child, and 11 years since Maria del Carmen Estrada's murder, investigators in Houston arrest telephone repairman Anthony Shaw.
There wasn't anything to link him with the murders until you were able to run his DNA.
Police are confident that whoever killed Maria del Carmen Estrada is also responsible for killing Diana Rabola and Dana Sanchez. But with no DNA available from the scene of those crimes, detectives decide to confront Anthony Shaw in an interview. Detectives gear up for a high-stakes showdown and interrogation, hoping it will be the key to breaking the case wide open. As the interview begins, Shaw sits down and calmly presents his version of events, while the officers tread carefully, uncertain of what lies ahead.
And I ran across this really a beautiful young lady for your ride. She turned me down. But she was on my way to work every morning.
Shaw initially admits to officers that he did meet Maria del Carmen Estrada on the day that she went missing.
One day it was misting rain. She saw me, she asked me for a ride. We were going places. She was talking about, yeah, she wanted to go out. Well, we pulled in. We wanted a Dairy Queen. They all rescued. They all rescued. It was going okay. She was amenable to a kiss.
Listening to Shaw recount these events, I don't hear the self-absorbed narcissist that people might attribute to him. I hear someone telling a story, very matter-of-factly, all right? It lacks empathy, right? But it's not embellished.
When I pushed her further, it got out of hand. I opened her glass and she was resisting. When I had this sleep consumption, not like voices in my head, but just driven, that I was going to have her regardless. I don't know what the hell you call it. I've tried to understand this, but I wanted to possess her somehow. She became real violent, just finally wanting to get out of the car.
Detectives brace themselves as Anthony Shaw begins to talk, and then talk some more. What he says next will change the entire course of the investigation.
I didn't set out to kill her. That was not my intent. But it got out of hand. I strangled her.
Detectives are stunned by Shaw's chilling honesty. The interview takes a dramatic turn as he begins what appears to be a confession, claiming he strangled Maria del Carmen Estrada.
When he was interviewed by law enforcement, there did seem to be a desire to clear his conscience.
Officers, keeping calm as Shaw confesses to murder, are blindsided by a new revelation. In 1993, 14-year-old Selma, a name used as a pseudonym to protect her identity, suffers a brutal attack. Is another mystery about to be solved?
I'm guessing she was probably 16, 17 at the time. I'm not really sure how old. She was young, she was attractive. She was a latchkey kid coming home from high school or whatever school she was going to. So I had broken into the house, which wasn't easy. The door was unlocked, and I waited for her to get there.
So the living rape victim was a young person whose house he surveilled for several days. Shaw was a telephone lineman. He had access to every neighborhood in Houston.
You can basically spy on so many different people throughout the day.
He had a reason to be there. He had a marked vehicle. It made it totally easy for him to just look for victims and exercise his demon.
And I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't have to take a life and tie her up with electrical cord and raped her.
I didn't know of her existence when I worked on Deanna's case and on Carmen's case in the early 90s until he admitted to them a decade later, after he was already caught and his DNA identified and matched.
Shaw holds back from taking Salma's life, but he confesses to detectives his insatiable urge to kill will ultimately become unstoppable.
Strangely, she fought like hell. I mean, just wouldn't go along with anything.
The details he provides about the targeting of 9-year-old Diana Rabola are devastating.
And she was so afraid, I'm sure, that I don't recall what type of cord or strand or piece of wire or something. And did the same thing. I knew it, and I don't know why. It kept happening. I couldn't stop it.
I think Anthony Shaw wants to be a paradox to the country. Yet on one hand, he wants credit for these brutal rapes and murders and anything else he wants to, yet at the same time, he wants everybody to know how sorry he was and please ask for my forgiveness and so forth. You know what? That day's long gone. You blew that.
For detectives tasked with proving the case against him, Shaw's confessions are a treasure trove, and he's far from finished. As he keeps talking, he unveils chilling details about how he crossed paths with Dana Sanchez in 1995.
I was making a corner, I just said, hey, if you love, go ahead. She says, man, I'm going to see my boyfriend somewhere. I forget where she told me. I said, no problem. Jump right in.
He's going to younger girls to comfort himself, okay? If he starts actually now talking to this girl and confiding in her, it's probably because he knows that older women would think him strange, right? Younger girl is going to listen.
I was flirting with her heavily. At the time I had really long hair. She was jokingly, no, I've got a boyfriend, this and that. So I grabbed her, pulled her into the back of the van. I knew there was nothing I could do to get out of this. And I used a ligature. Remember what it was? I want to say it was a yellow, twisted nylon rope, but I don't remember for sure.
The profile of Shaw's victim resembles very much the little girls he used to entice over to his house vis-a-vis his sister. Shaw is on his way back to childhood.
I pulled her out into a field and left like a bat out of hell, scared to death. Do you know how her body got found? Yes, I do. What? I don't know, on this phone call. And who made that phone call? I did.
Shaw admits the anonymous tip that led investigators to Dana Sanchez's body came from Shaw himself.
When Dana's not found, I guess, I gotta get some sort of attention. Someone's got to know about it. Anthony Shaw, obviously was in tune with the news of what he had done, and evidently, since nobody knew, particularly the media, nobody was broadcasting to the world, particularly local news, wasn't telling anybody about the latest murder. He certainly wanted credit, wanted to be known.
In Texas, full disclosure can lead to plea deals, even in cases involving serial killers. If Shaw is trying to avoid death row, his chilling arrogance suggests he won't succeed. He seems to take a twisted pride in recounting his crimes. He then delivers yet another shocking revelation.
Anthony had another victim.
It's unfathomable what happened to her, and she was the first.
She started freaking out, and I begged her. I said, please stop. Do this. Let me just give you a ride. She's like, no. I freaked out. I don't know what came over me.
Anthony Shaw reveals that 6 years before killing Maria del Carmen Estrada, there's another victim.
Lori's case was in 1986.
Lori's 14 years old. I mean, think about your children, who are 14 years old. I mean, it's unfathomable what happened to her.
Laurie Tremblay was full of life, bright, happy, deeply loved, but oblivious to the danger that she faced if coming into contact with Anthony Shaw.
Laurie was walking to school, doing what thousands and millions of youngsters do every day.
One morning, this girl comes up and asks me for a cigarette while I was at the stoplight. I asked if she needed a ride, and I gave her a ride. And a couple days went by. She saw me. I gave her a ride again to school. She and I became involved just in the sense of kissing. You know, hello, goodbye. I started giving her a ride on a semi-regular basis.
He keeps returning and develops this very strange relationship with a much younger girl, which is not outside his modus operandi if you consider his daughters, and starts to confide in her, right? And she listens to him. He decides to up the ante, you know, and wants to kiss, wants to take it further.
One day it was misting rain. She saw me and asked me for a ride, and I wanted to get more involved in just the kissing and stuff, and undid her bra. Everything got out of hand. She freaked out, and we got into a fight.
As Shaw speaks, the revelations come thick and fast. Details that would have stayed hidden if not for the DNA breakthrough that shattered the case wide open. The officers listen intently, piecing together the chilling truth that he's finally laying bare.
This one freaked out, threatened to tell, and that was the stress that created that, you know, unempathetic, low impulse. Everything was just on super drive.
I tried to knock her out because I just really freaked out. It's not right. I'm not justifying it. It's hard to talk about. I took this cotton cord and I tried to make sure that she would never ever tell anybody, even though I knew that was insane.
He tells investigators he didn't use his signature tourniquet on Laurie. He says that his trademark killing method was adopted after an accident during her murder.
So Shore changes his MO and uses this tourniquet because he claims that he injured his finger while murdering Laurie Lee Tremblay with his own bare hands.
Shaw claims to have callously dumped Laurie's body behind a Mexican restaurant before returning to work. And that same evening, he performs piano at a local jazz club.
That's how serial killers operate. They blend in, so they remain anonymous, so they don't tip off that there's anything wrong with them.
If detectives accept Shaw's claims of full disclosure, Laurie Tremblay emerges as his first murder victim.
Six to 7 years passed between his rape and strangulation of Laurie Lee Tremblay in 1986 and his rape and strangulation of Maria del Carmen Estrada in 1992. This is suggestive of that cooling off period that the FBI developed many years ago, right? Serial killers, 2 to 3 victims, at least over a period of time with a cooling off period.
Investigators' research tells them many serial killers follow a pattern known as the killing cycle, which typically progresses through 7 distinct phases.
In the first phase, there's this aura phase where you start to withdraw from society. And then you begin to troll your victim, right? We're all familiar with that term now, thanks to social media. Then there's this flirting phase, phase 3. Phase 4 is when you capture the victim. Phase 5 is when you murder them. 6 is when you take something of theirs, a totem or a trophy, which I prefer. And then 7 is depression. 7 is what, so this 6-year period, he is undergoing some sort of catharsis, some sort of chrysalis phase. And he's going to come back with a vengeance.
Despite Shaw confessing to 4 murders and a sexual assault, he has not been tried. Detectives focus on charging him with Maria del Carmen Estrada's killing, backed by the strongest forensic evidence. Held without bail, investigators intensify their efforts to verify his chilling claims.
Just going through the evidence, working hard, interviewing people.
Investigators build a case based on DNA evidence, Shaw's confessions, and the modus operandi of the tourniquet killer. In October 2004, Shaw appears at the District Court of Harris County, charged with the murders of Lori Tremblay, Maria del Carmen Estrada, Diana Rabola, and Dana Sanchez. He pleads guilty.
Sometimes we do see, on very rare occasions, somebody who truly feels like they are born evil, and I believe that that's Anthony.
In hindsight, we see red flags. At a very early age, the starting of a recipe for a serial killer.
On November 15, 2004, a jury sentences Anthony Shaw to death by execution.
The people whose children and family members were murdered are broken from the crimes of Anthony Shaw. And there's really nothing that we in the system can do to fix what happened to them. But I do believe that by finishing the case and asking that the sentence be carried out, that at least they can move on. And there are no future dates for them to have to worry about. No more court appearances, no last-minute appeals. It's finally over for the justice system. Of course, the pain that's caused those victims is never over.
District Attorney Kim Ogg becomes responsible for scheduling Shaw's execution.
When I became the Harris County District Attorney, my prior relationship with Anthony Shaw, our paths crossed again all these years later. And it became my duty to schedule executions of people who had already received the death penalty. Shaw's name was on the list. And because of the age of the case, the overwhelming evidence, the fact that I knew Shaw's work, I felt it was appropriate that he be the next in line for execution.
But as his execution date looms, the now bald Shaw delivers yet another shocking confession that leaves investigators reeling.
He comes forward with these 11th hour confessions to buy himself time. Could have been seeking to extend his own life. He bragged about up to, I think, 60 additional rapes.
I learned that there were, according to him, many other rape victims. We've only learned that as his death date approached. And that he considered it an accomplishment to be able to rape women without murdering them. And so he confessed to a number of alleged rapes that he said he committed on women that he met in social settings or bars, where he would slip them Rohypnol, the date rape drug, take them to his van, rape them, sometimes sell them to others, and then deliver them back, supposedly without them knowing what had happened to them.
Where I knew we weren't through with him. So it wasn't surprising to me that after he was executed, all of a sudden we find out he was claiming 60 some odd sexual assaults, rapes, and any other horrific offenses.
Law enforcement will look at the claims that he made, and we'll go back and look for old cases. I would hope that anyone watching this who came into contact with Shaw and who felt like they might have been violated, whether the statutes run or not, whether it was ever reported, I hope they'll let law enforcement know.
On January 18, 2018, 55-year-old Anthony Shaw is executed by lethal injection.
I don't think we're ever going to know what was going through Anthony Shaw's mind at the time of his death, but I don't see how it couldn't have been the faces of his victims.
I can tell you from being up in Huntsville the day of the execution with the victims' families, unequivocally, Anthony Allen Shaw's reign of terror ended that day for them, and justice was carried out.
We're rethinking the death penalty all over America. I think Americans are evolving in the way we look at it. I know that I am. But when you look at a guy like Anthony Shore, in my 30 years, he is the worst of the worst. And as long as the law exists, unfortunately, there are going to be individuals like Shore. But he earned his way to the top of the list on Texas's death row.
There's a reason we have the death penalty in the state of Texas. And Anthony Allen Shore is numero uno why we have it.
Well, there's a lot we can learn from Anthony Shore. In looking at people, we can't tell. No one can tell who's a murderer and who's not. I think that we have to support science and technology in and applied to criminal justice. We should never get away from the basics as law enforcement and prosecutors, but that science like DNA has revolutionized criminal justice in my lifetime.
I vividly will never forget Anthony Allen Shore and the murders of Maria, Dana, Diana, and Lori. I think if anything you're going to take away from this is never assume if you're out walking by yourself that you're not going to be targeted or you're not going to be a victim. Because like it or not, there's Anthony Allen Shores walking and living amongst us today. That's the sad reality. They are your next door neighbors, they're your coworkers, they're your friends, your business partners, people you recreate with, people you go out to dinner with. You just don't know. And he's living proof of that.
When Anthony Shore claimed the lives of his victims, he believed his crimes would remain buried in the shadows, beyond the reach of justice. But what Shore didn't count on were the leaps in science and forensic technology that would one day catch up with him.
His daughter's outcry spurred his arrest, which led to the DNA sample being taken from him because he was convicted. And when his sample was entered into the CODIS database, it matched.
What he did to his two daughters ends up solving the murders of the four young girls, because if he hadn't have committed those atrocities, the abuses on his daughters, who knows if it would ever have been solved.
Leaving a trail of forensic evidence that connected his horrific crimes against his children to a series of murders was a killer's mistake.
Police switchboard.
Hello, I want to report a missing person. She's my children's mum, and when me and the kids woke up in the morning, she wasn't there, but her car's still outside.
Has she has an accident somewhere or some kind of medical episode, come to some harm where she can't raise the alarm herself?
Half the time they've been found safe and well.
I thought she might have just gone for a nice little weekend away somewhere.
The days went by and we started to realise that something had probably gone wrong.
You just instinctively know that something's wrong, something's not right.
You are under arrest on suspicion of murder of Sarah Welgrave.
In the middle of the Kent countryside lies the quiet residential area of New Ash Green.
New Ash Green was built in the 1960s and 70s as a kind of model village. It's a sort of nice bit of suburbia that's sort of been plonked in the middle of the Kent countryside. Nice place to live, for bring up families, there's sports clubs, pretty quiet. There is quite a strong community there. Everyone knows each other and supports each other.
It was the perfect community for popular beautician Sarah Welgreen to set up home with her growing family.
As a daughter, Sarah was everything you could wish for. She was caring, she was incredible fun to be with. brilliant company on it, you know, used to love going shopping, out for lunch, going on holiday together. She was feisty, she was very caring, and she'd always, you know, she'd always stand up for the underdog. Loved her children without question, always there for them. What else can you say?
I lived in the same house for the entire time I was in secondary school. I've always been close to my mum. If I ever needed anything or needed someone to speak to, she would have always been there for me.
As well as sons Jack and Lewis from a previous relationship, Sarah also had 3 children with Ben Lacombe and dedicated her time to her family.
Sarah worked incredibly hard for her children. She had her day job, but she also had clients in the evening and at weekends, so she had her official clients at work, she had unofficial ones, and everything she did for her children. If you went out shopping for the day, invariably the money would be spent on the children. She always made sure they had good holidays, Halloween, Easter, birthdays, never missed a thing.
My mum, she always used to provide for us. She'd rather go without and see us have everything that she could give us, really. She'd always put us before herself, and it really did make her a good mum. It was great. I was proud of how she was and the woman she was.
The couple's dedication to their children meant that when their relationship broke down, they decided to do what was right for the kids.
They were going to co-parent the children together and just have different rooms in the house and just bring their 3 children up together in a household where they'll have their mum and their dad.
Despite the unconventional setup, it worked for both Sarah and Ben, and both started dating once again, with Sarah meeting Neil on a dating app in 2016.
She'd met Neil, who lived in Farnham. They were quite happy.
I did like Neil, and yeah, from the times I met him, he was a nice bloke. Neil did love my mum.
The couple soon got engaged, and there was more exciting news to come.
In October, she phoned me up. She was really, really happy. She's just got this brand new job, pays more money, she'll be better off, the kids will be better off. She'll be able to help me out more with anything I need. So she was really excited to start it. So everything was looking up for her.
And she was absolutely thrilled to bits with it. She couldn't wait to get started. And that was, like she said, it's in the next phase of my life now.
On 9th of October 2018, just before 8 p.m, Sarah returns home from work still on a high about the new job offer.
She'd come home and she'd been seen arriving, went into the house. She went to bed, had texted a boyfriend, sent a few text messages to other people. She told a friend that there's always something to look forward to. You've just got to open your eyes and dream.
The following morning, Sarah's boyfriend Neil texts Sarah, yet he doesn't receive any reply. After a few hours, he calls Sarah's ex, Ben, to ask if he knows where she is. But Ben tells Neil he thought she was with him.
Neil hadn't heard anything, wasn't getting responses back from Sarah, which was unusual. So he had phoned Sarah's parents.
Neil rang me and said, I've been trying to get in touch with Sarah. She's not answering her phone. And I thought, well, Sarah could be a bit scatterbrained. Either her phone would be out of charge or it'd be unplugged or she'd leave it in the car. So I tried to ring her a few times and then I thought, well, when Neil said he couldn't get hold of her, to be honest, I thought maybe she doesn't want to talk to you because it could be a bit intense.
She might have just been ignoring him to begin with, which she could do. So when I tried getting hold of my mum and she wasn't picking up her phone, I'd try through Facebook, texting, phoning some more, just any possible way out to get hold of her. Like tried her other phone, her work phone that she had, but nothing.
The following day, Ben reveals Sarah's still not returned home, and concern for her well-being starts to grow.
Messaged her again and tried WhatsApp, and then I thought, no, this is really, really odd.
I became quite worried because I just wanted to know if she was all right. It's my mum, like, it's the person who's brought me up for my entire life. I just wanted to know that she was okay.
After 48 hours and still no sign of Sarah, Ben decides it's time to call the police.
Kent Police Switchboard.
Hello, I want to report a missing person.
Okay.
She hasn't gone missing before. She lives with me. She's my children's mum. She came home Tuesday night, and then we all went to bed. And then when me and the kids woke up in the morning, she wasn't there. But her car's still outside.
On Thursday, the 11th of October, Ben Lacombe contacted us to report Sarah had gone missing. He told us that he'd come home from work. He said Sarah had come home just before 8 o'clock and she had gone to her room and she had settled herself into her room, which was on the first floor in their house. They stayed in separate rooms in that house. He told us that after putting the children to bed in the evening, he went to bed himself in the loft converted bedroom. And he said he went to sleep, had a full night's sleep. He'd woken up in the morning and found that Sarah's car was still at the address that she was missing. After Sarah had been reported missing, officers attended the address and we began a missing person investigation.
Officers turned to Ben for help to piece together Sarah's last known movements, but he said he fully expected to see her the next morning, as it was a special occasion.
He wasn't expecting that Sarah would be gone. In fact, that day was one of their children's birthdays, and they had plans, and he'd expected her to be there.
Officers carry out a routine search of Sarah's bedroom and immediately notice something.
What we did find was that Sarah had left behind not only her car, but her car keys, her house keys, her purse, her cash, her bank cards, her handbag. In fact, everything that anybody could tell us that Sarah had was still at the address. Certainly, it looked like she'd gone out without any planning, leaving everything behind.
Concern was now growing.
There was no way she'd have gone out and left her keys behind.
The minute I'd realised that she'd left her handbag behind, with a purse, car keys, and so many other things that
Bank
Sarah,
cards.
of all the people, would never have gone without any of those things.
For somebody that's gone missing, to have left all of those items behind was really strange and really concerning.
You just instinctively know that something's wrong, something's not right. Something's happened to her.
In the quiet suburban area of New Ash Green, concern is building over mum of 5 Sarah Wellgreen, who has been missing for 2 days. With her life seemingly looking up, a new job and a fiancé, police need to ascertain what would make her disappear. So establish a timeline of Sarah's last known movements on the 9th of October, the day she went missing.
It was a normal day for Sarah. She had taken her children to school that morning. She'd then gone out to meet some of her clients. She was a beauty therapist that used to meet some of her clients at their home addresses, so she went out and saw some of those people. And generally had what her family were telling us was a normal day. Sarah drove home and went into her home address. She'd settled herself into her bedroom. We know that she'd phoned her friend and then she was settled down for the night.
When she disappeared, the next morning there was contact between various people who knew her. It was agreed that if she didn't return that day or by the next day, that Ben Lacombe would telephone the police.
Kent Police Switchboard.
Hello, I want to report a missing person. She's my children's mum.
Concerned that her disappearance was out of character, police issue a missing person appeal to the public.
I first became involved when we received a press release from the police initially about a missing person from New Ash Green. They said Sarah Wellgreen had gone missing. There were concerns for her welfare. We get so many cases of missing people that you're probably not too worried to start with. Half the time, before you've written a story, file copy about a missing person, the police will send something out saying they've been found safe and well.
But there was something more pressing for the police. Sarah had left her car keys and purse at home, leaving only a couple of scenarios to consider.
I thought maybe she'd gone out for a run and hurt herself.
Has she had an accident somewhere? Has she gone out and had some kind of accident or some kind of medical episode, come to some harm where she can't raise the alarm herself?
With the first few hours of a missing person investigation being critical, police launch a search perimeter around Sarah's home.
They set up a 5-mile radius around New Ash Green for the search effort, scouring woodlands, fields, sheds, wherever anyone could look.
I think they've done all the right searches they could within the area, you know, woodland, scrubland, the mud flaps. They've done all the right checks.
Desperate to reach out to his mum, Lewis turns to social media, and the village community immediately rally round.
Lewis put a call out on Facebook one evening saying his mum was missing and had anybody seen her? And I was thinking, oh, you know, something needs to be done. So I phoned the pavilion. They said, yeah, we can meet people there. We put a shout out on Facebook.
I think the whole village answered the call, really. Everyone turned out.
The response I got from the post on Facebook, it went quite far, very, very quickly. It was shared hundreds of times. It got all over social media so quickly, and then it got put into the papers and everything like that as well. Just from one little post like that, there was hundreds of people that went. Most of the village in New Ash Green went, and from the surrounding areas went as well. It did give me hope that I would be able to see my mum again.
The search began with combining the efforts of the police and the community, police leading it, of course.
We have walked and searched every piece of woodland, every field, every bit of grazing land.
There was a sort of lingering hope that she'd be found, you know, maybe she was injured or something, or, you know, something had happened, but she was okay, and that they would come across her. But the longer it went on, it was just no news at all about anything like that.
With no sighting of an injured Sarah within a 5-mile radius, police check her digital footprint for any clues into her whereabouts.
The police looked at her telephone evidence, they looked at billing data, they looked at banking evidence, all various sources of evidence, looking at hospitals to see whether or not there was any trace of her.
There was nothing, no footprint at all digitally of Sarah from that point onwards.
With Sarah seemingly having disappeared without a trace, detectives tried to delve into her life.
We spoke to many people, her family, her friends, and other people in the community, people that Sarah had as clients. We were trying to build up that picture of Sarah. She was a happy person at the time. She had just secured a brand new job offer, which she'd accepted, which came with a fixed salary and a company car.
No doubt whatsoever that Sarah would disappear like that. She was so happy. We'd had a drink on the Friday, she was happy. She was full of life.
With all logical avenues as to Sarah's whereabouts exhausted, police start to suspect something more sinister has happened.
The days went by, and we started to realise that something had probably gone wrong.
My suspicions became raised that something had come to cause Sarah some harm, rather than Sarah having just taken herself away. I then was considering, well, who may have caused Sarah harm? Had Sarah gone out and met somebody that was pre-planned, and that person may have then caused Sarah harm? Had Sarah had somebody come to the address and he had taken her away?
But who would have done such a thing? Suddenly, everyone known to her is under scrutiny.
We actually had the police turn up at the house to see if she was there, and it's like, no, we, the ones who've got someone to phone you, she's obviously not here. But obviously they've got to do their job, they've got to come around and check all addresses that she might be at, things like that. So I understand, but turning up to the address where me and my brother are living.
Despite searching multiple addresses of family and friends, there is no sign of Sarah. And when they speak to Ben again, he admits that despite playing happy families, there's more to Sarah than meets the eye.
He went on to say that Sarah's life is a bit strange. It was a bit weird. He said Sarah often would go missing, would often disappear, would go away without telling us. That actually she would go off and meet other people.
Suddenly, police are met with an endless list of suspects. Did Sarah secretly meet someone she knew that evening? Police begin to look closely at anyone Sarah might be romantically involved with, including fiancé Neil, one of the last people Sarah spoke to.
The police came round with a search van on the Friday. They were there for a couple of hours because we sat down and they were asking questions, chatting about lots of different things, lots of possibilities, everything like that.
Neil tells police that he had a brief conversation with Sarah on the night she went missing.
That night I phoned her at 24 minutes past 9. We had a 15-minute conversation and then we exchanged a couple of texts after that, which was normal, and then we said goodnight.
Detectives check his phone records and confirm these calls, but he still needs to prove he was at home in Surrey when he made the calls.
I had my daughter, who at the time was 3, overnight anyway, and so they knew I wouldn't take a 3-year-old all the way over to Kent around the M25. As I said to them, look, if that's any concern, then just check the M25 cameras.
Neil's story is quickly verified, so attention turns to other friends and acquaintances.
We had a lot of people involved in Sarah's life, and we did a significant amount of work to show how they could not have been there that evening. They could not have been with Sarah that evening. And in all of the evidence that we found around Sarah, through her messaging, through her contacts, through her phone, we had nothing to say that Sarah had made any plans that night to go anywhere. There was nothing to say that she'd gone out.
1 week into the investigation, and Sarah remains missing.
You struggle to take it all in to begin with. There's just so many people trying to get hold of you, message you to make sure you're okay. It's hard to explain in a way of how it sort of makes you feel, because you're a mixture between angry, upset, worried, and you just want to know where she is. That's all it is. You just want to know that she's okay.
The desperate search for Sarah intensifies. Police trawl CCTV cameras from neighbouring homes in the village on the day Sarah disappeared.
We captured on CCTV some footage that we were able to see from a neighbour's address. Sarah drove home and she parked her car outside her home around 5 to 8 in the evening on that Tuesday. She then went into her home address.
Police keep watching the CCTV, and suddenly all becomes clear.
And it was from that moment that he became a suspect for potentially.
In the quiet residential village of New Ash Green, the community is desperately waiting for news into the disappearance of Sarah Wellgreen, who vanished from her home the night before her young child's birthday. Ben Lacombe says Sarah returned home from work and both retired to their separate bedrooms. When he woke in the morning, she had gone. But a neighbour's CCTV camera reveals something unusual at 2 a.m. on the night of her disappearance.
The CCTV imagery demonstrated captures of a vehicle which was in all ways similar to the vehicle driven by Ben Lacombe, and it had, because it was a taxi, a distinctive logo on the driver's side of the door. And one of the captures, although it was very grainy in the night, had a blur consistent with that same logo.
With some expert commissioned work around the imagery that we've got and comparing that to the vehicle itself, we had very strong evidence to say that that footage was that vehicle.
Believing the vehicle to be Ben's taxi, detectives trawl CCTV and ANPR cameras in the neighbourhood in an attempt to follow the vehicle's movements.
His taxi had been caught on CCTV cameras going out of New Ash Green and down country lanes, going south and finally at Plaxtell Green Lane, at which point it had kind of disappeared.
And then a little while later on, there were captures of an almost identical vehicle travelling back the other way. And that was key, because there was no vehicle that went out and back in that way.
So we now had Ben Lacombe's vehicle on the move between around 2 a.m. in the morning to around 4:30 a.m. in the morning, the night that Sarah had gone missing. So why was Ben Lacombe's vehicle moving for 2.5 hours or so that night when he said he was alone, asleep in his own bedroom all night?
Despite neighbours' CCTV capturing his vehicle return at 4:30 a.m, was it really Ben who was driving it the night Sarah vanished? Detectives rewind the footage to see if anyone else entered the property before Sarah arrived home.
Ben Lacombe told us that he'd come home from work. CCTV footage showed that he came home about 5:10 in the evening.
Detectives keep watching, but no one else is seen entering the property before Sarah arrives. But it was the neighbour's CCTV which flagged up another interesting detail.
Ben Lacombe had a sophisticated CCTV system installed at his own address.
From the neighbour's CCTV, we were able to see, going back and viewing 3 months' worth of footage, that the CCTV cameras on Ben Lacombe's house was on almost every single night running up to when Sarah went missing. And we know that because you can see the infrared lights of the cameras through the other footage to see when they're on and when they're switched off. So we know that after midnight, the cameras were switched off on Ben Lacombe's house.
With more and more discrepancies in Ben's account, police start to believe he knows more about Sarah's disappearance than he lets on, and start to piece together his movements.
We're able to show that when Ben Lacombe drove home from work the day that Sarah went missing, he'd passed some cameras and we could see that his car was spotlessly clean. The following morning after Sarah had gone missing, Ben Lacombe took the children to school, passing other CCTV cameras. Now that morning, the car is now dirty. There is mud up both sides of his car and around the tyres and the wheels of his car, but wasn't there when we saw him arrive home the day before. Around 10:30 that morning, he went to the office where his cab firm is that he worked for to see one of his colleagues. When we see it arrive outside that office, the car is spotlessly clean again.
It appears that on the night Sarah went missing, Ben Lacombe drove somewhere in his vehicle, resulting in it getting covered in mud. But there's a 2-hour window where the vehicle goes off radar. So where did he drive to? And where is Sarah? Having carried out some good old-fashioned detective work, and despite not having found a body, police make a decision.
So it was on the Monday, doing a formal review of what we had so far, that we moved the investigation from being a missing person investigation into the next day, when it became a homicide investigation.
They said they weren't going to do a television appeal, and I thought, they know something's happened. And on you just know that you're not going to see her again. You know that.
Police believe Ben Lacombe murdered Sarah, but with no cause of death or clear motive, need to work harder than ever to build a case for an arrest. Phone records prove Sarah sent her final text at 10 p.m. Their home CCTV was switched off at midnight, giving Ben a 2-hour window in which police believe he killed Sarah, before putting her in his car and driving off.
The defendant having driven to some kind of deposition site, a grave where he had disposed of Sarah's body.
And then returned along the same route, where he's picked up again on CCTV. There was mud on his car the next day, which he had cleaned off promptly before going to the taxi office.
It was a pre-planned murder that Ben carried out. He killed Sarah. And myself and my team at the Major Crime Department, we instigated plans on that day to have Ben Lacombe arrested on suspicion of the murder of Sarah Welgreen.
Please, can you open the door, please? Morning.
Morning. Venice, please. Just sit up first, chest hands a minute. Okay. Right, sit up first and let you wake up and I'll explain what's going to happen. Time is 6:45. You are further under the arrest on suspicion of murder of Sarah Welgreen. This is a further arrest on the discovery of fresh evidence. This evidence provides inconsistencies with statements provided when you reported the missing. Your arrest is necessary to allow you to be questioned about the offence. Understand? Understand that? Okay, you don't have to say anything. My harm defence will mention and question later on in court. Anything you do say may be evidence.
When I found out that, he'd actually been arrested for murder, there's a feeling of anger, hurt, hate, all of the things that you associate with your partner being killed.
It's just a massive shock to the system. It's just unbelievable what goes through your mind. Now all the questions is, where is she? What did he do? How did he do it? Did she suffer? Was it quick? You just don't know the answers to it.
Okay. So you are under arrest today on suspicion of the murder of your ex-partner, and I understand you still live in the same address, that's Sarah Welgreen. Now, as I say, you're here on suspicion of murdering her. We believe she may be dead, and that may be at your hand. So, did you kill her?
The pressure is on to find Sarah's body, establish a cause of death, and prove a motive to enable police to charge their suspect.
It was a vast operation, and one that has involved help from not only officers and staff from across Kent Police, but from across other forces nationally, using experts from the fire service, the marine unit searching water, searching confined spaces. We've searched around 1,400 different areas. We haven't found Sarah.
With searches proving fruitless and the clock ticking, detectives press Ben further.
So, I'm not clear at the moment, Ben, whether you're just trying to think of an answer or whether you've decided not to answer the question.
He remained utterly silent. He did not answer any of our questions. He did not give us any information. He stayed absolutely silent and stared at the floor through 7 hours worth of interviews.
After failing to answer any questions, and despite no body being found, police charge Ben with the murder of Sarah Welgreen. But what really went on that night? And why did their once-loving relationship end in such a tragedy? In a Kent village, the body of mum of 5, Sarah Welgreen, has still not been found. but police pursue a case of murder and have charged 38-year-old taxi driver Ben Lacombe.
It's hard to believe that it's happening to you. I know you see things like that, everything going on in the news and see it all in the newspapers and things like that all the time. You never think it will hit home, never, until one day it just turns up on your doorstep.
In September 2019, the trial into a no-body murder case begins at Woolwich Crown Court.
When you prosecute a case in which the body of the deceased has not been found, it presents unique challenges in the trial. And those challenges is to demonstrate that the defendant that you're prosecuting is responsible for killing the deceased.
The prosecution reveals to the court a conversation between Ben and police a few days before he was arrested.
We asked Ben Lacombe if we could take information from his mobile phone, and he said to us that actually he wouldn't give us his phone. It was very late. He wanted to go to sleep, and he would give us his phone the next day. As it turned out, and what we later captured on CCTV, was that Ben Lacombe didn't go to bed. He left the address. He travelled around and went into the Dartford and the Greenhithe area and parked up for a few minutes late at night near the River Thames.
There was CCTV footage of the defendant in the pouring rain, desperately trying to get rid of something. And the prosecution suggested that that was the defendant trying to get rid of his own telephone. We knew from other evidence that he had purchased a new telephone in the days that followed Sarah's disappearance. And he was obviously keen to get rid of his own telephone, a telephone which could have given the police an indication of his whereabouts on the night of the 9th of October.
The prosecution reveals further evidence linking Ben to murder.
Although the police didn't know exactly what had happened to Sarah's body, they knew that there had been a period of an hour and a half or so where that vehicle had disappeared. And it seemed likely that as part of the planning, Ben Lacombe had already chosen where it was he was going to dispose of Sarah's body. It may even have been that he had already dug her grave.
When we did a search of Sarah Wellgreen and Ben Lacombe's home, we found a very large shovel in his shed.
The defendant's account of why he needed a shovel of that type at his trial would later become that the shovel was there for his mother to use to tend to the flower beds at the front of his property. Well, on any view, the flower beds at the property didn't require a shovel of that size, and the explanation given just simply wasn't a credible reason for having a shovel of that type. But it was a shovel that was relatively new in its appearance and was consistent with the type of implement that someone would use to dig a grave quickly.
Despite presenting their evidence to court, police still have no obvious motive as to why Ben would kill the mother of his 3 children. But as the trial unfolds, more information about the couple and their relationship comes to light.
Ben Lacombe was born in Greenwich, grew up in Charlton. Early 2000s, he moved to Mallorca, where he was hoping to find work as an airline pilot, or train as an airline pilot.
In December 2004, Ben met Sarah via an online dating site.
In the beginning, when Ben first met my mum, from what I could tell as a child, he was a nice bloke. From what me and Jack had seen, he was all right, he was nice. And everything seemed great, really, to begin with.
Desperate to create a stable home environment and provide her sons with a father figure and a better lifestyle, Sarah quit her job and moved to Mallorca to start over with Ben and her 2 sons.
Obviously, Sarah thought, oh, this is going to be a good life. You know, I really want to give this a try. And it did sound good.
But it became clear to the courtroom that their new life in the sun didn't work out as planned. Unable to speak the language, Sarah couldn't get a job and missed her family and friends back in the UK. Ben's dream to become an airline pilot failed to materialise, and instead he worked a low-paid airport job.
In the end, they moved back to England. By that point, they'd had their first child together, and they moved to New Ash Green.
The couple settled into village life. Sarah got a good job while Ben started working as a taxi driver. But cracks soon started to appear in their relationship.
They muddled along, arguing, bickering, fighting for months after that. And they finally split up. Sarah had made her mind up. She'd had enough.
But if Sarah thought splitting with Ben was going to be easy, she was mistaken. He threw her, Lewis and Jack out on the street, keeping their 3 youngest children inside the house with him.
I was angry with Ben, but that had been built up through a few months of just listening to the arguments and things like that, and then that just throwing us all out was just unfair on us, really. We had nowhere else to go.
The next morning, Ben already had a court hearing arranged, and he stated in court that Sarah abandoned her children. Could he have custody? And he was awarded custody. It was all pre-planned, and Sarah could not defend herself because she did not know what was happening.
Distraught that she no longer had access to her youngest 3 children, Sarah and her 2 eldest sons moved in with her mum and stepdad.
We were absolutely devastated. You see your child crying and you can't help them. And we literally scraped up everything we had to go and see a solicitor.
But things took a positive turn for Sarah in August 2016, when she was awarded full custody of the children. Not only that, she met boyfriend Neil. Despite this, Sarah was terrified that Ben would attempt to take the children away from her if she moved in with Neil. So she made an unlikely peace offering with Ben to raise their 3 children under the same roof.
Sarah wasn't happy about living with Ben. There was definitely animosity between the 2 of them. You know, they'd been together for a number of years. That didn't work out for various different reasons.
Yet Sarah had a plan: to buy Ben out of their 4-bedroom family home. And she soon secured a new job with a big enough pay rise to make this happen. And after arriving home from work on 9th October 2018, she tells Ben her plan.
Ultimately, Ben had lost control. The house was going to be put up for sale. He was going to lose his home, even though he was going to get half the equity.
And he'd lost not just, the property which he loved so much, but he'd lost control of the children.
When you look at Ben Lacombe, he would have been left with almost nothing.
Because he would have found himself in a position that Sarah was in not long before. And I think that probably pressured him into doing something stupid.
Ben was the only one that would have a motive for killing Sarah. Nobody else. Ben had everything to gain from getting Sarah out of the picture permanently.
After a grueling 30-day trial at Woolwich Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Ben is found guilty of Sarah Welgreen's murder. He is sentenced to 27 years in prison.
"27 years for Ben Lacombe is not enough. Ben Lacombe should never see the light of day until he admits to those 5 children where he's put their mother. I've got one child who came home crying the other day because they wanted their mummy to pick them up from school one last time. So no, not enough.
The case of Sarah Welgreen is among a small number of convicted murder cases in the UK in which the victim's body has never been found. But the community has never given up hope of finding her.
We give the family hope that one day they will be able to find her, otherwise they've not got that hope to hold on to.
And that they know that we're still looking, and they know that we won't stop looking, do they?
It's not been forgotten.
No, not at all.
We would like closure. All of us would like closure. For the body to be disclosed, to have a proper funeral, will probably help us all put it to bed.
2 years on from her disappearance, Sarah's family are slowly coming to terms with life without her.
Ben's actions have caused me to lose my mum, for some of my siblings to lose their mother and their father at the exact same time. And it's an unthinkable thing. It really is. You never expect anything like this to ever happen to you, and you wouldn't wish it on the worst person. It's just a horrible, sunken feeling and just a hole in your heart that you'll never fill.
It is very raw. There's not a day goes by when you don't think about her, whether it's something that's played on the radio, or you see something, oh, Sarah would like that, or something the children say. Yeah, there is never a day goes by, and I don't think that will ever change for any of us.
And until she is found, the question remains, where is Sarah Wellgreen?
Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?
We can't tell, we're trying to get into the room.
You can't open the door, can you not break the door down or anything?
I think the person is lying in front of the door.
Okay, so the person that you're calling about, can you see them?
It's just about through the bedroom door. There's blood everywhere. It looks like the person has been stabbed.
West Midlands Police have been alerted to a fatal stabbing in Birmingham. Forensic investigator Cara Nichols-Parkin is dispatched to assess the scene.
I've been working in forensics for 22 years now. I've dealt with hundreds of serious incidents and unfortunately a lot of murders. It's our job to go in there and identify who's responsible. We have to piece together what the forensic evidence is showing us.
There's a blood stain here. Blood drops all the way up the stairs.
The team head to the bedroom, where emergency services discovered a body. The man is identified as 30-year-old Kenneth Ford, the tenant of the property.
Really heavy blood stain here. There's just so much blood in here.
Cara starts by examining the victim for evidence of what could have happened.
He's got quite a lot of injuries. Whether the injuries in his head are from a tool of some sort, it's hard to say. He's got bruising around his knuckles and everything, so I suspect he's fought back at some point. He got lots of defensive wounds to his hands, which just shows that the attack had been going on for some time. We'll get his fingers and hands done first, and then we'll swab his black eye, in case obviously that was done with a fist.
Swabs are taken from the victim to check for the presence of anyone else's DNA.
There was nothing to suggest that this was a robbery or anything like that. Does he know the person that's committed the offence? We need to find out what's happened.
With a violent killer at large, police start urgent door-to-door inquiries.
I don't suppose you've heard any disorder over the last evening, this morning, I think?
It's fighting or somebody...
I can't really give you too much information. Have you seen or heard any disturbance over the road at all?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
I've seen is I'm from here and going back.
Yeah. All right, no worries. Thank you guys for your help. Have you heard anything in there today?
Yeah, last night, yeah.
What time was that, roughly? Could you hear anything in particular?
With evidence gathered from the bedroom, the forensic team follow the trail of blood downstairs.
With a situation like this where there's so much blood, there's a good chance there will be a transfer of blood from our victim onto the suspect. Spatter's potentially gone onto the clothing, fingerprints in blood. There's some stain on the floor, and there's a lot of blood down here. Did it start down here and move up there, or has it been moving between the two?
The scene is secured for further forensic analysis, and Kenneth's body is removed for post-mortem.
Quick chat, yeah.
Officers at the scene identify the man who called the ambulance.
Basically, I had a call saying that, you need to call an ambulance for Ken. Something's happened. And I said, where are you? Call the ambulance if he's not in a good state. He goes, no, I've gone.
Can I ask who that was, mate?
His name's Gary O'Neill.
I'm just seeing if I can get any more on him.
An officer checks the police national database of all known offenders in the UK.
Gary O'Neill, there you go, got you. That's going to be him.
As a search begins for Gary O'Neill, Cara joins the homicide team, led by Detective Inspector Michelle Thurgood, for a case briefing.
Morning, everybody. This briefing this morning is in relation to the murder of Kenneth Ford. A phone call was made to a friend of the deceased from Gary O'Neill saying that Kenneth needed an ambulance.
I'll just run you through the scene we've got. So the front door leads into the lounge. There's a sofa that's underneath these stairs here. There's a lot of blood staining around that area. But then upstairs, so when you go upstairs, the deceased was found just behind the door. There's blood everywhere in the room. It's been a really nasty attack. He's got lots and lots of injuries. So we just need to establish what's gone on.
In terms of Gary O'Neill, obviously we need to get Gary an interview so we can understand what occurred and process him for any potential forensic evidence that he might have on himself or any of his clothing. And the murder weapon is still outstanding. Can we see what that weapon was? OK, thank you, everybody. It's clear that Kenneth Ford was the victim of a violent attack. At this moment in time, Gary O'Neill is the suspect, but I have to keep my mind open. He called to say Kenneth needs help, so he could be a witness. We do often have witnesses that don't come forward because they are frightened. We need to eliminate the fact that anybody else could be responsible.
So if we can just walk the street, yeah, and just line it from the centre of the road under the vehicles, we'll do the drains last.
A team of 8 specialist search officers is deployed to comb the square miles surrounding the crime scene in search of the murder weapon or any other forensic evidence that could identify the killer. With no sign of Gary O'Neill in the local area, officers begin to trace his card transactions, looking at where he's used it within the last 24 hours.
We can see where he's used his bank card. That can be financial transactions in shops, restaurants, or it can be use at cash points and ATMs. We can literally track any kind of expenditure that he's doing.
Gary's financial records reveal that he bought a coach ticket in the early hours of the morning, before Kenneth was found dead. Up to 15 coaches leave Birmingham Station every hour to destinations throughout the country.
He could be going anywhere all over the country. Our concern is that he's going somewhere where there's a port, where he can then continue his journey and leave the UK entirely.
Authorisation is granted to access Gary O'Neill's phone so that officers can analyse his cell site data.
Overnight, cell site used in and around the offence location, and then I haven't seen a trace of this phone until 15:52 today, and it's in Carlisle.
Carlisle sits 200 miles north of Birmingham.
When somebody's using the internet or social media platforms, or whether they're making actual phone calls, they're connected to a mast. All of that phone data can be tracked.
But he's now moving away from Carlisle.
He's following the M6.
Yeah, it's tracking up the M6 now. Already past Lockerbie.
So he's heading to Scotland.
Yeah.
This is a serious point in the investigation. If Gary O'Neill committed this offence, he's a dangerous man. We need to arrest Gary and get him into police custody.
An alert goes out on the UK's police databases that Gary O'Neill is now wanted on suspicion of murder. With bloodstains suggesting Kenneth was assaulted in different parts of the house, blood pattern analyst Phil Field is sent to the crime scene to determine how the attack unfolded. He starts by examining the bloodstains downstairs.
My role as a blood pattern analyst is to really examine the distribution of blood and determine what kind of activities within the scene might have occurred to produce that blood staining. A blood pattern can tell numerous stories. Plenty to support the view the injured party may well have been assaulted whilst sitting in this seat. I've got a number of questions. What was the nature of the attack and how many people may have been involved? What were the movements within the property? There actually appears to be some clotting blood. So it would suggest that the injured party has been here for a period of time that's sufficient to allow that clotting process to happen. The blood clotting process really is the body's natural response to an injury. Blood platelets grouping around the site of the injury to form a mesh to stop the bleeding occurring. It can take somewhere between 2 and 15 minutes for visible signs of clotting to appear.
Having analysed the blood patterns downstairs, Phil heads to the bedroom where Kenneth's body was found.
I've just discovered some spatter on the radiator behind this curtain. There's some moving transfer patterning going on here that indicates quite heavy contact with a heavily blood-wet item moving in contact with the radiator. So in terms of identifying an attack site in the property, this is definitely one. There actually appears to be some clotting blood and some
tufts of hair in that stain.
The blood within this region provides really good evidence that this attack has occurred whilst the victim's injuries have already begun to form clotting blood. So his injuries have actually been sustained at least several minutes earlier. If I were to hypothesise, I'd be saying he's bled a lot here and then made his way upstairs where he's really taken more of a beating.
The different sites of clotted blood suggest that Kenneth was attacked over an extended period of time. Detectives have been searching for Kenneth's killer for 4 hours, when they are alerted to an emergency call from a driver to his depot on a coach heading to Scotland.
This guy's an absolute spanner. He hasn't been able to utter a word that makes a sense. My dog can bark a sentence better. And he's harassing my brothers, ruffling, charging. It's the way he's putting himself across. It's just like he's staring right through you.
Yeah.
As if you're a bit of glass. He's really not there.
Scottish police are called to remove the man and identify him as Gary O'Neill. They seize his possessions, including clothing.
I'm just looking to get a better understanding of who the suspect is in this case.
With Gary detained, Lisa turns to Kenneth's social media accounts to work out whether there's a connection between the two men.
We can do work then around their Facebook and things like that and see how closely linked they are. We can see on here that they come from the same area of Ireland and have moved to the area together from Ireland. This video was taken by Kenneth on the 27th, just a few hours before he's killed.
Now, this is just my house. Don't like this out. Don't get me wrong, I've only moved in. Carpet's going to be changed.
When Kenneth is showing us around the house, he's really proud of himself. He's proud that this is his home. He shows us the sofas in the living room where all the blood is found at the scene. And then he takes us up the stairs.
Now, that's like 2 beds. This is what Gary was used. As you can see, it's a big room of Kate.
What is surprising about this video is that it looks like Gary and the deceased have been friends, like really good friends, and he wants to share this house with Gary.
Right now, this is room number 1 for Gary.
You can hear his voice, and he's happy and he's proud and he's looking forward to living with his friend.
Now, that's like 2 beds. This is what Gary...
Yeah, within 12 hours, something's happened that's ended up with Kenneth being killed. And I genuinely can't understand what would warrant this sort of attack on your friend.
The next morning, Gary O'Neill is transferred from Scotland to Birmingham for questioning.
Can I step over here, please, mate? Stand here, Gary. Can I have your name, please?
Gary O'Neill.
And the offence he's been arrested for, please.
Murder. You've got to remember why you're here. No, don't. Well, you're here on suspicion of murder. You said I was here for murder. That's suspicion of murder. That's the offence.
Gary, if you understand, obviously murders is a serious allegation to put towards someone. So having you under arrest, okay, means we can interview you and we can get your side of the story. We know there's two sides to every story. Okay. I'm going to ask you about your health and well-being. Do you suffer from any heart, epilepsy, asthma, diabetes or allergy?
No.
Okay.
But I did have a blood clot to the brain 10 years ago.
Okay. Any other physical medical condition? So what's that then, mate? You're a? Benzodiazepam. Do you have any injuries? So can you show me your hands? Okay. Right. In line with that then, Gary, I've heard what the officers told me. I'm happy that the arrest is lawful and legal, and therefore I'm going to authorise your detention.
323.
Swabs from Gary O'Neill will be tested for traces of Kenneth's DNA. They will also be compared to DNA found on Kenneth's body to determine if Gary was involved in causing his injuries.
Only DNA I'm gonna find here is my own DNA.
In the forensics department, crime scene coordinator Cara receives the initial post-mortem report.
It's quite shocking to see how many injuries are actually there. I think they're saying 100.
Just the sheer quantity of injuries was probably the most injuries I've ever seen. It's obviously gone on for some time and it's took a lot of effort to cause all those injuries. It was a sustained attack.
Cause of death is attributed to the head and facial injuries, only compatible with an assault with an implement, and at least a few resemble injuries compatible with the end of a claw hammer. So you can see, the two injuries with the gap in between, which is consistent with the claw.
With Gary in custody, detectives call upon Cara to establish a forensic strategy for the investigation.
I've just got Phil's findings. So there may have been an attack site downstairs, and there is clear evidence of an attack site upstairs. The presence of clotted blood here indicates that the attacks happened over a period of time. Yeah. It's been a frenzied attack. Loads of injuries, which looked like potentially from a claw hammer.
So everyone that we have spoken to are saying Gary and Kenneth are really close friends their whole lives. They live together, they do everything together. So why Gary would then decide to kill Kenneth remains unclear. In terms of the forensic strategy, Cara, you've already put something in place around that, have you?
So
It's going to be based around the blood and the transfer of blood between the two to put him there at the time of the actual assault, whereas his DNA within the scene isn't going to prove that he's committed the offence because he's been in that address a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Gary and Kenneth were really good friends, and I think he'd been staying at that address. So Gary's fingerprints and DNA would have been within the address. So we really needed to focus on transfer of the blood, fingerprints in blood, that would put someone there at the time of the actual offence where he was bleeding.
We've got Gary's clothing, that is blood-stained, so we can identify whose blood that is. If Kenneth's blood's on Gary's clothing, then obviously that puts him at the scene at the time that the assaults happened.
Also really important for tying him in to actually the murder.
To determine whether Gary was present during the attack, Cara sends in a team of specialists to search for any fingerprints in blood at the scene.
Yeah, I can see some marks just on the banister rail here. Possibly could be ridge detail. Having looked at it, I think it's going to be best if I just cut it off here and here, and actually get that treated in the lab.
Due to the banister being on the stairs and that it's sort of circular in shape, it's quite difficult to actually photograph at the scene. So in this case, we decided to cut the banister out and send it into our fingerprint development lab.
If they can find a fingerprint in the blood, it could reveal who killed Kenneth. The mark in blood on the banister is fast-tracked for forensic examination.
There's quite a lot of blood staining, quite a lot of smears.
Forensic technician Vanessa Gardner scrutinises it for any ridge detail.
There's one particular area that looks like it might have some quite good detailing. Now we're going to have to use all the different light sources to see the best way that I can capture the actual ridge detail before we photograph it. We can see the area of ridge detail in blood, and this filter is making the blood appear darker, so it's giving us more contrast.
Next, the ridge detail is chemically treated with acid dye, which can make blood fluoresce to enhance any fingerprints.
For this item, I'm using acid violet. With this, because it is quite heavily blood stained, I can see that the blood's already reacting. Just need to move it into the wash now, acid wash, and just get rid of some of the background staining and to give us the most contrast.
The ridge detail must be further enhanced to be usable for the Fingerprint Bureau.
We're getting contrast, but we're losing the ridge detail, so when we turn it into a grayscale image, that might be better for the fingerprint expert to have a look at. We're getting good contrast, so that's the mark that I'll be sending up to the Bureau.
The Fingerprint Bureau will compare the mark against both Kenneth's and Gary's prints. Detectives are still trying to establish whether Gary O'Neill was at the house on the night of the attack, and if he was alone.
OK, so we've got some footage from the scene, which is Colebrook Road.
They retrieve footage of the streets near Kenneth's house from the day he was killed.
Kenneth Ford has been killed in a particularly brutal attack. We have no murder weapon and we have no forensic evidence to link the suspect to the scene at the time of the attack.
There he is.
Here we've got the suspect walking towards the front door. The suspect goes into the address. There's a couple of other people with him and they look like they've got a pushchair.
And what time's that at?
This is at 22:58. So they've all gone into the address. I think this is them leaving now. So now we're on 23:21. So they've been there about 22 minutes maybe altogether. Yeah. And we can see the suspect and the person who we believe is the deceased in the doorway.
Because he's quite tall, isn't he?
He is tall. We've just got the suspect and the deceased left in the home address, haven't we, at that point?
Yeah. The suspect leaves screen time of 01:57.
Yeah.
And then he looks to be a little bit worried about that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
So he walks off the other way, but the other way is a dead end. So he kind of waits a little minute, walks up there, and then comes back past.
So it looks like he's carrying a big, shopping bag, isn't it? We could have taken the murder weapon with him.
Yeah, looks like it. So in between the witnesses leaving and this time now, nobody else comes or goes to the address.
This is a real breakthrough for us because this shows that no one else is in that property, just Kenneth and Gary, which obviously leads us to believe that no one else can be responsible for what's happened to Kenneth.
With the new CCTV footage and evidence gathered from the crime scene, Gary is taken in for questioning.
So, Gary, you were arrested on the offence of murder. The law states murder is where a person of sound mind and discretion unlawfully kills with intent to kill or cause grievous bodily harm. Did you commit murder against Kenneth Ford?
No comment.
Okay, Gary, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some CCTV that we've recovered. Is that Ken that's come to the door there, Gary?
No comment.
We know when the unknown male and female had left that it is yourself and Kenneth in that property.
Is that you?
No comment.
What looks like a shopping bag in your hand?
No comment.
Was Kenneth alive at that point?
No comment.
Okay. We're showing the full photographs of injuries to Kenneth's head. They're not pleasant, okay? He's been subject to what appears to be a frenzied attack. Blunt force trauma on his head, other injuries on his torso. How has he got those?
No comment.
What weapon did you use to hurt Ken?
No comment.
What I'm going to show you now are photographs of the address. We have bedding that's heavily saturated in blood. You're nodding your head, and then you can see blood on what appears to be the door. Whose blood is that?
No comment.
Have there been any disputes between you and Ken? Were you angry?
No comment.
Whose blood is that on your clothing?
No comment.
If those clothes are sent off, will there be any of Kenneth's blood?
No comment.
Will it be your blood?
No comment.
Kenneth is dead.
You were there that evening?
That's your mate, isn't it? You've come to England together for a better life. This is your opportunity to tell us what has happened.
No comment.
Okay. We'll conclude the interview now then.
Gary O'Neill has given no account. If somebody is innocent, why would they choose not to raise an account? The CCTV confirms that he was at the house, but it doesn't prove that he is the person responsible for the death of Kenneth. What we need is forensic evidence that categorically shows that he committed the murder.
So I'm just laying the item out just so I can see it from the front.
The top that Gary was wearing when he was arrested has been sent to a specialist laboratory to examine for blood.
Straight away, I found some red brown staining. So I'll test it using Castlemere and see if it gives a positive reaction.
The faint spatter marks on Gary's top are tested using a filter paper. Next, a chemical mixture is added that contains phenolphthalein, followed by hydrogen peroxide. If blood is present, the chemical will react by turning pink.
Pink reaction there, so that is a positive for blood.
Right, so what we got is hoodie?
Yeah.
Hooded top.
With the marks confirmed as blood, forensic scientist Steve Paddock begins a detailed blood pattern analysis.
If we find Kenneth's blood on Gary's clothing, then that would be crucial for the investigation because it would put Gary at the scene at the time that Kenneth was bleeding. So we've got a direct link with him to the assault.
Right. Let's have a look at this. It's quite widespread, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Some contact staining down the right sleeve. Some of it quite heavy. Well, during an assault, you might have blood transferred in a number of different ways. Firstly, when a perpetrator or their clothing comes into direct contact with a source of wet blood, and it will create what we call a contact or a transfer blood stain. The second way is where airborne droplets are projected through the air. Blood can be flicked off a hand or a weapon, or if a forceful blow is delivered into a source of wet blood. We have got some airborne stains on the hood as well. The size of these stains are very small, some of them less than 1 millimetre. This indicates it's most likely to be caused by impact spatter, a forceful blow into a source of wet blood, and the force of the blows caused the blood to break up into droplets. We may only expect these droplets to travel maybe no more than 1 metre. So by observing such small droplets on someone's clothing, really it places them in very, very close proximity. So in this allegation, we've got a suggestion the wearer has repeatedly struck an individual with a hammer. The victim's got blunt force injuries to his head. So to me, particularly this impact spatter would be very much in keeping with that. Quite odd-looking staining, quite like a downwards direction.
Yeah.
And one explanation for that is the hammer's been swung with blood.
Yeah.
It's wet with blood, it's been swung and stopped. And his right shoulder and the blood's projected down to the lower rear of his back. Let's take a couple of stains for DNA. Certainly, if DNA matches the victim, then certainly take some explaining.
Yeah.
The blood samples will be analysed for DNA profiles to determine whether the blood belongs to Kenneth or Gary. The ridge detail print, taken from the banister, has been expedited to fingerprint expert Claire Lynch. A match to Gary would prove that he was in the house at the time Kenneth was killed.
We've got apparent friction ridge detail. Friction ridge detail is the little lines that we have on our fingers, is what allows us to identify somebody. So in this case, there is ridge flow. It's an indication to me that that's not necessarily a finger digit, but it's actually a piece of palm. On our palms, we have ridge flow. All of those ridges have characteristics, like a fingerprint. We're going to be looking at this area here on the palm, because between the digits on palms, the ridges flow underneath and make a loop pattern. So that is something we can use to identify somebody with.
Before checking if Gary's fingerprints are a match, Claire first compares the image with Kenneth's prints to eliminate him.
When we're looking at our characteristics, We want to ensure that the characteristics on this side, which is our recovered side, match exactly to the ridge characteristics of our known impression. Because this impression is apparently in blood, the quality of the impression is actually really quite poor. So we've got to be aware that some things may look a little bit thicker, a little bit chunky. Sometimes that impression that's been left, dependent on whatever surface it's been left on, it can actually make certain characteristics look slightly distorted, and that can make it very difficult for us to identify somebody. So we have a ridge coming down here, a ridge coming down here, and they join at the bottom and then carry on. On our known image, we've got a ridge coming down here, a ridge coming down here, and they join and carry on. This characteristic here is called a bifurcation. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm counting here. So I've got a ridge ending that's coming up, and then I've got 3 intervening ridges. So they're just ridges that go between 2 different points of characteristics. We call it coincidence sequence, and it's just where we have the same characteristics in the same placement from one to the other. It just takes one difference to say that it's not that person. So I'm satisfied that everything that I've marked from this impression is actually present in the fingerprint form. My conclusion is that it is an identification to the right palm of the deceased person.
Confirmation that the fingerprint is Kenneth's means that detectives still need forensic evidence that places Gary at the scene at the time of the murder.
In my opinion, from his own actions post-offence, Gary is the person responsible for the death of Kenneth. So it's really important we look at all the possible lines of inquiry to link Gary to the attack. You went last week up to Glasgow in terms of other inquiries with the custody staff.
While awaiting the results of the blood analysis on Gary's top, detectives revisit evidence gathered by Scottish police at the time of his arrest.
No statements from any custody staff that had any dealings with Gary. And the CCTV from the custody block to show his demeanour, how he was reacting. All of that could be really crucial to the investigation.
So we've got statements from the custody team. His initial comment was, "Why am I here?" And she said West Midlands Police were coming to collect him at some point to speak about a murder. And then he's asked, "Is the person dead?" And she said, "Well, if it's murder, then the person has to be dead." She said that he started to get really upset then, with tears flowing down his face. And then he had said that they'd had some kind of falling out.
Which is really, really interesting, bearing in mind he then went on to say no comment in interview.
And then he's gone on to say, "How long do you get for murder?" And the ladies replied, "Well, anything up to life. It all depends on the circumstances." He then said, "I wouldn't get done for murder if it was an accident."
That statement is a really, really significant statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have obtained.
Yeah,
Excellent.
definitely.
Gary may not have known whether Kenneth was dead. He did phone the witness and say, "Get him help," which suggests potentially he didn't know. One way or the other, Gary O'Neill is a risk to the public, and we still need forensic evidence which puts Gary in that premises at the time of the offence.
Scientist Steve Paddock receives the results from the blood found on Gary's top.
So what we're looking at here is the DNA results from one of the spots of blood on Gary O'Neill's grey hooded top. We look at 17 specific areas of DNA in an individual's genome. Each area would normally expect to see 2 DNA components, one inherited from each parent. Where we only have one peak, this means the same area of DNA has been inherited from this individual's mum and from their dad. Also, what we're seeing is these minor contributions of DNA. So we have DNA from at least 2 individuals within the results. One individual has contributed significantly more DNA than the second. So what we have here is I have Gary O'Neill's reference DNA profile. This represents a graphical representation of this string of numbers. So if we look at this first area of DNA, I can see that Gary O'Neill, his components are 15 and a 17. So they are represented within this DNA profile. We can see that there's a major designation of a 22 and a 23, and a minor designation of an 18 and a 19. If we refer to Gary O'Neill's reference DNA profile, I can see he is in fact an 18-19. So we can see that it's possible that Gary O'Neill has contributed a very small amount of DNA to this result. This is not an uncommon finding. We'll pick up some background cellular material, generally from the wearer themselves. What I have now is a reference DNA profile obtained from Kenneth Ford. So we can see at the first area, Kenneth Ford has a single peak and it's designated as a 15. We move on to the second area of DNA. Within Kenneth Ford's reference DNA profile, again, this is a single peak, this time designated as a 14. If we compare this to the same area of DNA from a blood sample taken from a jacket, we can see this is a large single peak designated as a 14. And in fact, if we go along the remaining areas of DNA, we can see a Kenneth Ford DNA profile matches the major contribution obtained from the blood sample on the jacket. To me, this will provide very powerful evidence that this blood has in fact originated from Kenneth Ford.
Confirmation that the blood on Gary's top belongs to Kenneth is the forensic evidence detectives need to charge him.
Right, we've gone to CPS with all the evidence, and CPS have authorised to charge for you. Your charges for murder, so between the 27th of the 2nd, 22 and the 28th of the 2nd, 22 in the county of Birmingham, murdered Kenneth Ford, contrary to common law. Okay, have you got any replies to that charge?
After being charged with the murder of his friend, Kenneth Ford, Gary O'Neill submits a defence statement.
We have the defence case statement for Mr O'Neill. Quite interesting and not probably what we expected. Gary says, I had an argument with Kenneth Ford. During the course of the argument, he told me to leave his house. I went to get my PlayStation and he said that I couldn't have it. Hit me on the head, knocked me down. He kept hitting me and I was worried as I had previously had a serious head injury. I tried to hit out to stop him but couldn't. I then picked up the hammer, which was on the floor in a tool bag. I hit him with the hammer to stop him from hurting me. I do not know how many times I hit him with the hammer. I remember hitting him downstairs, but I have no recollection of hitting him upstairs. I did not set out that evening to kill Kenneth Ford. I am sorry for what happened. The first point and the key point is he accepts causing the death of Kenneth. So, comparing what he says was the assault by Kenneth, what are his injuries?
As far as I'm aware, I don't think he had one injury on him at all.
He then talks about a psychiatric report whereby he talks about a head injury sustained and finishes it off by saying, I will plead not guilty to murder, but guilty to manslaughter. This defence case statement has a huge impact on the investigation because we are now looking at a potential plea of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. Diminished responsibility is where you've got an abnormality of mental functioning from a recognised medical condition that may affect the ability to form a rational view on what is happening at that moment in time. Traditional forensics gives us potentially the who, the where, maybe even the when. Forensic psychology can assist us understanding the why.
To decide whether Gary has grounds for diminished responsibility due to his head trauma, the Crown Prosecution Service calls upon an independent forensic neuropsychologist to make a clinical assessment.
Forensic psychology is increasingly being seen as of assistance to the court. Other forensic sciences, blood pattern, fingerprints and so on, have a physical manifestation they're looking at. In psychology, we're dealing more with what was the function of this behaviour? Why did he behave the way he did? It's an extraordinary behaviour. Why would someone do that? Somebody might have some impairment or damage that means they don't understand the nature of the act or they don't understand that it is wrong. So for example purposes, here's a scan of a brain. What we're interested in is where there might be some gaps or lesions in the brain. And that can happen with head trauma, which could be as a result of blows to the head. In this example model, we might think that there was damage here, where there's a black area, so no blood flow getting there behind the right eye in the frontal area of the brain. It's a little bit like if there's a roadworks and you can't get down a certain street, the blood can't get to that part of the brain. If that impaired, we can't think things through properly before acting. Behaving becomes impulsive and not something that's completely under our own control at all. So in Mr. O'Neill's case, he says he's had a head injury. And when looking at diminished responsibility, an absolute sort of cornerstone of our work is to look at whether somebody is telling the truth. Are they attempting to exaggerate difficulties, pretend they have a problem that doesn't actually exist? Now, maybe he has had those things, but we have ways and means with the testing that we do to detect people who are faking. This is a murder trial. It will have significant consequences for the accused. It already has very significant consequences for the families of the poor deceased. I would be running between 15 and 20 separate psychometric testings to give it the gravity that it deserves and make sure I get a full and proper set of information and opinion to offer to the court.
While psychological assessments are carried out on Gary, Michelle must decide whether to recommend the Crown Prosecution Service accept his plea of manslaughter and move to sentencing, or recommend that he be tried by jury for murder.
We received the first psychiatric report on behalf of the defence on his mental health and specifically around a head injury and whether a head injury he'd historically suffered could be responsible for Gary potentially committing this crime. As you know, Gary is going to make that guilty plea to manslaughter. My decision, along with the Crown Prosecution Service, is whether we accept that plea. The decision whether to go from murder to accepting a plea of manslaughter, diminished responsibility, it's not an easy choice. The difference between a conviction for murder and a manslaughter can be huge. Murder carries a mandatory life sentence. Manslaughter can attract as little as 3 years. Somebody has been killed. Their families are always at the forefront of everything we do, but it has to be evidence-led.
It's a sustained attack. This is the downstairs, a lot of blood here, but then it's gone upstairs, so that obviously shows that it's happened over a period of time. These are some of the injuries that were sustained. He got injuries across most of his body.
How many injuries were there altogether?
I believe there was 112 in total.
In terms of volume, there's a huge amount of injuries that I've personally seen.
The hammer used in the offence hasn't been recovered.
No. Correct.
And he's had the presence of mind to attempt to flee the country.
This is someone who knows what they're doing. Having gathered all the forensic evidence, my absolute view is that rather than just accepting a plea for manslaughter, this should be a trial for murder.
After 17 hours of consultation over the course of 3 weeks, Dr. Green completes his assessments. He must recommend to the jury whether Gary O'Neill's plea of diminished responsibility should be considered by the court or dismissed.
After assessing Mr. O'Neill, there was clear evidence that the head trauma caused damage to his brain such that blood is now not flowing to parts of his brain that would help him control and organise his behaviour, and he's incapable of stopping himself once he has begun acting. Across many of the tests, looking at his ability to weigh things up, he's scoring around the first percentile. This means that 99% of the population would be more able than Mr. O'Neill to plan their behaviour and understand the consequences of their actions. It's my opinion that a defence of diminished responsibility may well be open to Mr. O'Neill due to this organic damage to his brain, which were material to his behaviour at the time.
Diminished responsibility is very complicated and it has a huge impact on the investigation because it's the difference between murder and manslaughter, and Dr. Green's assessment is a key part of the evidence. It's right and proper that the jury have the opportunity to consider all the evidence and reach a verdict. I thought I'd just give you an update from the trial. So, Gary did give evidence, but says he doesn't remember what happened.
Nothing at all?
Nothing at all. The jury took the view that potentially brain trauma, that affects his ability to remember, and that affects his actions on the evening, and came back with a verdict of not guilty murder, which by natural default means he is guilty to manslaughter, diminished responsibility.
Forensics led to him pleading guilty. We just haven't got the murder verdict, have we? Disappointing.
Forensic psychology is becoming increasingly part of murder investigations. Its importance will continue to grow in the coming years as we understand more and more about the impacts of mental health on people's actions. The jury verdict of guilty to manslaughter was obviously very hard for Kenny's family.
Now, this is just my house. Look at the size of it.
They will always believe the sentence is not equivalent to the fact that their son has lost his life. Diminished responsibility gives a reason. It's not an excuse.